If there's one thing we don't need to worry about in Hellblade 2, it's the HDR black level floor, because it's on our reference level. The game is dark, very dark, not just in regards of gameplay and story, also in regards of the visual presentation. Hello my friends and welcome back to my channel. Let's talk about Hellblade 2, let's talk about HDR in Hellblade 2, and I would say we're starting with the most important thing first, the HDR system level calibration. And despite the fact that on the Xbox Series X version we have a setting where we can jump into the HDR system level calibration, I couldn't find any evidence in the game that this setting or the HDR system level calibration is actually supported. And regardless if I set my console or my Windows 11 PC now to the absolute maximum or the absolute minimum value in the HDR system level calibration, the maximum peak brightness and specular highlights was always the same. The average brightness and specular highlights in Hellblade 2 is roughly around 500 to 1000 nits. On very rare occasions you get a much higher peak brightness, and what I found is the maximum peak brightness what I was able to measure in this game was 10,000 nits. Please keep in mind, this measurement was taken with setting the HDR system level calibration on the Xbox and also on my Windows 11 PC to the absolute minimum value. That means the HDR system level calibration right now is, in my opinion, not working. So let's move on and let's talk about the HDR black level floor, which is from a technical point of view on a reference level. The problem what we have with the game is that in general the game is just way too dark and you have a lot of missing details on very dark objects. We can increase the visibility of details in shadows or on very dark objects with the HDR gamma setting what we have in the option menu, but I found a big problem with this setting. And what I found is actually quite interesting, because even you increase this setting to a value, let's say maximum 80, you will not lose the perfect HDR black level floor. Or what you gain actually is much more details in shadows. The problem now is you will also lose maximum peak brightness in specular highlights. And you're not just losing maximum peak brightness and specular highlights when you increase the HDR gamma setting, you also lose some color information. The whole picture actually is getting washed out. That's why my recommendation is, if you can, I would not touch the HDR gamma setting. The standard factory setting 50, yes, I understand it is very dark, but in regards of contrast, color information and maximum peak brightness and specular highlights, that's the best setting. The next setting what we have in Hellblade 2 is called HDR brightness setting, and we can choose between default, dark and bright. And even between the setting dark, default and bright is not a difference like day and night. I would strongly recommend that you use the bright setting to max out the maximum peak brightness in specular highlights. And last but not least, we have the HDR user interface brightness setting, and we can choose again between default, dark and bright. And this setting is purely affecting the user interface on the screen. Okay my friends, so what is now my recommendation in regards of the HDR settings in Hellblade 2? And to be very honest, there's not much to recommend. First of all, we need to keep in mind that the HDR system level calibration right now is not working, and it is apparently supported by at least the Xbox console, because there's an option menu where you can jump into the HDR system level calibration on your console. And why would be there an option point if it would not be supported? But again, at the moment it looks like, at least according to my measurements, it's broken. And when we're now talking about the HDR settings, what we have in the game, then I have a very clear recommendation. Do not touch the HDR gamma setting if you don't have to. If you really can't see anything, then slightly increase it, maximum 55. But if there are some options on your monitor, something like dynamic tone mapping on, then give it a try with that, because I found on my LG G2 actually the HDR option is actually too dark. Dynamic tone mapping on makes the picture much better in my opinion. So that's the recommendation for HDR gamma. And then the next recommendation what I have is the HDR brightness, where I would strongly recommend to use the option bright. And that's it already for this video, my friends. Let me know in the comment section, how do you like Hellblade 2 so far and where are you playing actually? So I have to say, I played most of the time on the PC, but I never had a perfect experience in regards of no stuttering. So the game actually, at least on my system, stutters the whole time, even with fixed 60 FPS, but maybe it's just my system at this very moment. I just briefly actually tested the Xbox Series version, and again 30 FPS, it's just not my thing. But in regards of the HDR implementation, there's not much of a difference, to be very honest. So it looks very similar, okay? We have the same settings, we have the same outcome. So let me know again, how do you think HDR is actually implemented? Do you like HDR in Hellblade 2? I personally miss a little bit of specular highlights, to be honest. And again, I found that sometimes the game is just way too dark, not just a little bit, way too dark. But in most of the time, actually, the contrast is on our reference level because of the great HDR black level floor. So again, that's it. Thank you very much for watching me. I see you guys next time. Bye.